Good evening. Earlier this morning, the President of the United States said this.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Well, reaction has been varied and widespread in the hours since the statement was made. Tonight, we look at the practicalities, posturing and implications of President Trump's idea by hearing from some of the people and politicians impacted. But first, Giles Gibson has this report from Tel Aviv.
Well, Guy, perhaps not surprisingly, the far right here in Israel is fully backing this vision of President Trump for the Gaza Strip. Itamar Ben-Gvir, of course, formerly part of Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing coalition government, saying that this is the only solution to what he describes as the Gaza problem. But it's not just the far right here in Israel. The opposition leader, Benny Gantz, has also come out and said that this is creative, original thinking from President Trump. However, at the same time, you have countries across the region coming out to condemn these proposals, including Turkey, Egypt, and most significantly, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia also saying that they will not establish diplomatic relations with Israel unless there is a pathway to a Palestinian state. That tone in the Saudi statement really contrasting very strongly with what we saw from President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu in that press conference in Washington, talking very positively about the prospect of the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This bombshell announcement from President Trump has also come at a critical point in terms of the Gaza ceasefire, because we are right in the middle of the two sides trying to move on from phase 1 to phase 2 of the agreement. Phase 2 being really the central planks of that being that all Israeli troops will withdraw from the Gaza Strip in return for the release of all Israeli hostages by Hamas. We have, since President Trump's comments, had a senior Hamas official coming out and saying that we are committed to ensuring the success of the negotiation in the second phase. And before this press conference, before this bombshell announcement by the US President, the Israeli Prime Minister's office had also said that they were going to send a high-level delegation to Qatar to continue negotiations later on this week. But really, behind the scenes, mediators, everybody involved in those talks must be asking themselves the question, just how serious is President Trump about this vision for the future of the Gaza Strip? Is he willing to jeopardize other aims as his, such as the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, in order to achieve it? Giles Gibson for A News in Tel Aviv.
Hamas provided a statement earlier. Let's just have a listen to their response.
We strongly reject President Trump's statements regarding the deportation of our Palestinian people from the Gaza Strip. With regard to America's control over the Gaza Strip, these statements reflect deep depression and frustration of Palestine and the region. Gaza is definitely not a terrifying land, and it's not a property that sells and grows. American bias against Israel and our Palestinian people, and against their just rights, he goes on and checks out such statements. We ask the US President to retract such statements, because such statements are shooting oil. Our people are the Palestinians, the living words and the factions of resistance. His Arab and Islamic mother, all the plans will fail. Of the Palestinian people and disarmament, we demand Arab and Muslim leaders. We demand an urgent Islamic Arab seal to consider such statements and take a historic position. Send a message to the world that the Palestinian people and their just cause, contained by the Arab and Islamic nation. He will not accept such positions and statements. We're with us. The first phase of the ceasefire agreement continues to be implemented. They are also ready for phase 2 negotiations, which was supposed to start over the past few days. And the disruption and delay in that is because of Netanyahu, who's stalling and trying to block access to phase 2. We also warn of attempts to escape entry in application of phase 2. or get out of Phase 3.
And it's not just political leaders who've been making their voices heard. People living in Gaza itself have also been giving their opinions, and the majority appear not to welcome the idea of being further displaced from their homes.
We are staying steadfast in our land here. Whoever rebuilds should not kick us out under the pretext of rebuilding. You helped Israel in the first place in this destruction that we can see here. Therefore, you have to rebuild for us while we are on this land. You can't say that we have to leave in order for you to rebuild.
About Trump's call to resettle Palestinians in Jordan, Egypt, or any other Arab or Islamic country, we also heard of Indonesia in the past. Neither the Arab countries nor the Palestinians will accept it. How can a Palestinian who holds the Palestinian nationality and whose ancestors died on this soil go to Egypt, Jordan, or any other country? This is rejected, and it will not pass on the Palestinian people because it is bigger than this, and its national and ethnic identity is strongly rooted in this land.
Well, political leaders from key actors outside the region have also been giving their reactions. First came the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, who gave this statement earlier this morning.
Australia's position is the same as it was this morning, as it was last year, and it was 10 years ago, and it was under the Howard government. The Australian government support and a bipartisan basis, a two-state solution in the Middle East. When it comes to our position, we have not received any request regarding the rebuilding of Gaza. What we have said, though, clearly, we've supported a ceasefire, we've supported hostages being released, and we've supported aid getting into Gaza. There is a need to do that, and Australia is willing to assist getting aid into Gaza to provide that support. We have done so. That is consistent with what Australian governments have always done.
British Foreign Secretary David Lammy was similarly not exactly supportive of President Trump's proposed plan.
Working alongside the Palestinian Authority and alongside Gulf and Arab partners, that's the guarantee that we all need to ensure that there is a future for Palestinians in their homeland. Donald Trump is right. Looking at those scenes of Palestinians who have been horrendously displaced over so many months of war, it's clear that Gaza is lying in rubble. We've always been clear in our belief that we must see two states. We must see Palestinians able to live and prosper in their homelands, in Gaza, in the West Bank. That is what we want to get to.
OK, well, let's go to Washington now and dissect this plan and the reaction to it with Newshour's Ubay Sharbanda. Ubay, always good to speak to you. A bold plan then, but it has to be said, an unenthusiastic reaction, certainly outside of the US and Israel.
Yeah, that's right. So you had President Trump's meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. The two have a long-standing personal relationship. Of course, there's that long-standing American strategic alliance with the state of Israel. And, this is part and parcel of President Trump's strategy. Look, yeah, we're all talking about the announcement that he made on Gaza and the need to rebuild it, get other countries in the Middle East to rebuild it, and, the possibility of relocating, at least temporarily, the Palestinians living in Gaza to either Egypt or to Jordan. But a number of other pronouncements and executive memorandums were issued by President Trump that we're not talking about because the focus is simply on this major sweeping announcement that the president made on Gaza. And that is, what was clear here is that following that press conference, we heard from Steve Witkoff, the president's Middle East envoy. We heard from Mike Waltz. We heard from the Morgan Ortegas, the deputy to Steve Witkoff, and they've been making the case to the public and to the media that, hey, the president believes that something needs to change. And that according to reports that we're seeing here in Washington is that this idea was one that was come up by the president himself, that the president believes that, look, we don't want history to repeat itself. And that seems to be the strategy here as a forcing function. Yes, we saw this almost immediately following the press conference. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia issued a press statement saying that any normalization with Israel, a topic that came up in that press conference with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, that any potential normalization in the future between Israel and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would be dependent and conditioned on a two-state solution between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So, Riyadh very quick here to issue, clarifying statements. But that seems to be the strategy here by President Trump, to issue a wide sweeping statement as the one that he made in Gaza as a forcing function for other countries in the region like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt to take more ownership. Now, of course, we heard from President Trump saying that the wealthy nations of the region, more than likely he's referring to the Arabian Gulf states, should be the ones that fund the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip. And President Trump made an astute observation that the Gaza Strip is essentially rubble, that most of the houses are destroyed. And according to most independent assessments, that is largely true. That, that according to the UN, most of the infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, and critical infrastructure in the Gaza Strip has either been significantly damaged or essentially reduced to rubble. So, Trump asked that question rhetorically a number of instances, that what is there even for the Palestinians to come back to? It needs to be rebuilt. So there are still major questions on how this plan that President Trump unveiled yesterday could be implemented. Would it require an American presence in Gaza? Remember, President Trump said, hey, we are going to own it. We are going to take over Gaza. Or is this meant to be simply that the U.S. is going to take a lead in pushing other countries in the region, Arab countries, Muslim countries, to provide more support to rebuild Gaza? So for me, that was a significant takeaway here, is that President Trump did make sure to say that he wants to also see Israel's neighbors living, as he said, in peace and tranquility. So everyone today in Washington, of course, is abuzz by this announcement on Gaza made by President Trump. But what's interesting enough here is that Trump, the master media strategist that he is, that no one is talking about the other announcements that he made. So this is the one on the maximum pressure on Iran that President Trump also unveiled yesterday and discussed in his press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And that is also going to be very significant, because Trump said that he wants to bring Iran's oil exports down to zero unless they comply with American demands on their nuclear program. So many things happening all at once. The media here in Washington simply just can't catch up.
Okay, how seriously should we take the plan to take over Gaza? Is it a Trumpian tactic to force more action from regional actors? Or does the president really, really want US ownership of the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, there's a certain methodology here that we've seen play out in the first term. But that's the thing, is that unpredictability is also a hallmark. Is President Trump bluffing? Well, anytime anybody bets that President Trump is bluffing, they turn out to be wrong, as we saw with Colombia, when President Trump was very serious in issuing that would have been catastrophic tariffs on Colombia's economy if they did not agree to take back those Colombian illegal migrants that the U.S. was trying to repatriate back to Colombia. And that was a brief crisis that was essentially resolved when the Colombian president, gave in and said, okay, we're going to take those Colombians in that you're flying in with these military transport planes. So that is part of certainly the strategy here. It's partly a policy strategy, partly a media strategy to keep the media, the pundits, the Democratic Party opposition sort of off balance. But look, we've already seen a reaction. If President Trump's intent here is to get a reaction from neighboring states, he certainly is succeeded in that. And he said in that press conference, a message that has been repeated by his national security advisor and his Middle East envoy, that we need to see something different in the Middle East. If Gaza, what's the point of helping to rebuild Gaza, according to President Trump, if this war and destruction only happens again and it's just a cycle that repeats itself over and over and over again? And that is sort of a big Trump-style idea that he likes to put out there, and that is a sort of a hallmark of the Trump strategy, and as a forcing function to get others to try to take ownership. Now, that being said, it's never a good idea to bet that what President Trump's intentions are. He's fast moving, and well, certainly, if his intent was to gain a reaction from neighboring Arab states, he has achieved that. And everyone in Washington right now is talking about Trump's major Gaza announcement. The question is, what took place behind closed doors in his discussions with Prime Minister Netanyahu? We do know that while the two leaders have a strong personal bond, that they both, during that press conference, showered each other with effusive praise, that there has been tensions between the two on a personal level in the past. So in many instances, when President Trump is praising a world leader that's standing right by him in front of, the world press in a joint press conference, it usually means that he's also putting pressure on them, privately. And that is sort of part of the art of the deal, that President Trump is very good at, publicly praising world leaders while privately putting pressure on them. And there has been a lot of pressure on the Israelis. Hey, what is the day after plan for Gaza? How do you rebuild an area with 1.8 million people that has been entirely decimated? And it's clear here that President Trump does not believe that there is a plan. So and he asked time and time again during that press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu, what is there left in Gaza for the Palestinian people, to go back to? Certainly, the Egyptian government and the Jordanian government, as the press reminded the president, have not been happy when President Trump has, in previous instances, brought up the idea that Egypt and the Jordanians must accept at least some Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. But President Trump stuck to his guns and said, I will talk to them. They will have to accept it. So far, at least publicly, those countries have said, no way, we're not going to accept a plan that will have the Palestinians leave the Gaza Strip. But President Trump seems to be sticking to his guns. And, many would say that the president has a point there where, now that there is a ceasefire, now we're entering the second phase of the negotiated ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip between Israel and the other side. Well, how do those people live? The 1.8 million people manage to live. And, President Trump said that he wants them to live a life that is safe, and that will, without the bombs, falling, and to live a life in a Gaza Strip where another war like this, would not happen or could not happen. So there's still a lot of the devil is in the details here, and we have seen the president's senior advisors speak to the media following that press conference with Netanyahu. But certainly it has the world abuzz, the media abuzz, and the pundits abuzz here. And it remains to be seen exactly how in action the neighboring states like Egypt and Jordan will take to this plan, beyond the public statements, that they've made.
Obey, thanks as always, Obey Sharbanda, joining us there from Washington. Well, that is all we have time for on this edition of Newshour. Please do stay with A News for more news and analysis. And from all of us here in Baku, we wish you a very pleasant evening ahead.